You hear it before you see it. A low sound. Not quite a growl, not yet. Something moving through the long grass at the edge of the tree line, slow and deliberate, in the way that only confident things move. Your heart is already hammering before your brain catches up, because somewhere deep inside you, older than language, older than thought, something ancient knows exactly what that sound means. For most of human history, you were not at the top of the food chain. You were prey. Not occasionally, not in rare, unlucky moments. For hundreds of thousands of years, the thing your ancestors feared most was not starvation, not each other, not the cold. It was the animal that already had its eyes locked on you from 30 meters away. And the story of how they survived it, how you are sitting here right now, is one of the most extraordinary survival stories ever told. Let's go back. Not 200 years, not 2,000. Let's go back 2 million years to the African savanna, when your ancestors were small, relatively slow, and very much on the menu. The paleoanthropologist C.K. Brain spent decades excavating a site in South Africa called Swartkrans Cave. What he found there changed how scientists understood early human history forever. Among the fossil bones of ancient hominins, that is, the early relatives of modern humans, Brain found something disturbing. Puncture marks. 2 perfectly spaced holes drilled into the back of a small skull, preserved in rock for nearly 2 million years. They matched, almost exactly, the lower canines of a leopard. Think about that. That skull belonged to one of your ancestors, and it ended up inside a cave because something carried it there. Brain's work, compiled in his landmark book, The Hunters or the Hunted, fundamentally reframed the story of early human evolution. For decades, scientists had imagined your ancestors as scrappy, resourceful hunters, clever, upright apes using stone tools to dominate their environment. Brain turned that picture completely upside down. He argued that for much of the time period known as the Pliocene and early Pleistocene, roughly between 3 million and 1 million years ago, early hominins were not primarily hunters, they were primarily hunted. So what exactly were your ancestors up against? The African landscape 2 million years ago was not the relatively tame ecosystem you might picture. It was loaded with apex predators in numbers and varieties that no longer exist anywhere on Earth. There were saber-toothed cats, not just one species, but several. Dinofelis, a powerfully built false saber-tooth, roughly the size of a modern jaguar, appears to have specialized almost exclusively on hunting primates, including your ancestors. There were short-faced hyenas twice the size of anything alive today, fast enough to run down almost anything on open ground. There were enormous crocodilians patrolling every water source your ancestors needed to drink from. And circling overhead, there were birds of prey larger than any eagle alive today, one of which has left fossil evidence suggesting it regularly hunted small hominins. That evidence comes from a famous skull called the Taung Child. Discovered by the anatomist Raymond Dart in 1924 in what is now South Africa, the Taung Child is one of the most studied fossils in human history. A 3-year-old Australopithecus africanus, a species that walked upright but was no bigger than a modern chimpanzee. The skull is beautifully preserved. For decades, scientists debated what killed it. Then, researchers studying the behavior of modern crowned eagles, the most powerful bird of prey in Africa, noticed something chilling. The damage patterns on the Taung skull, the scratch marks, the distinctive puncture holes around the eye sockets, were identical to the marks these eagles leave on the skulls of the primates they hunt and dismember today. A child, 3 years old, taken by a bird. This was the world your ancestors woke up in every single morning. So how did they survive? How did a relatively slow, relatively weak, largely naked primate, without fangs, without claws, without armor, without venom, make it through millions of years of being hunted from above, from below, and from every edge of the tree line? The answer is not what most people expect, and it starts not with a weapon, not with a tool, but something far more fundamental. Robert Sussman, a primatologist at Washington University who spent years studying predation pressure on primates, argued that group living itself was the primary anti-predator adaptation in your entire evolutionary lineage. The logic is brutally simple.
A solitary hominin on the open savanna was a dead hominin, but a group of 10, 15, or 20 individuals, making noise, scanning in multiple directions at once, capable of throwing rocks and branches and screaming in coordinated alarm, was a fundamentally different problem for any predator to solve. This is why the human need for belonging is not a soft preference, it is survival infrastructure. The deep anxiety you feel when you are excluded from a group, the near physical pain of prolonged loneliness, the way social rejection registers in the same part of your brain as physical pain. These are not modern neuroses, they are ancient alarms. For your ancestors, being cast out from the group did not mean embarrassment or social discomfort. It meant being alone in the grass at dusk, and alone in the grass at dusk meant dying before sunrise. Let's reconstruct a specific morning. Roughly 1.5 million years ago, Eastern Africa, just after dawn. Your ancestor wakes up high in the branches of a fever tree. Sleeping on the ground is how you get killed, so no one does it. Below, the savanna is cool and slightly orange, the acacia trees casting long shadows across the dry grass. The group begins to stir around the same time, maybe 15 individuals, including several children, a handful of adult males, several females. Before anyone descends, before anyone moves more than a few meters, there's an almost unconscious process happening simultaneously across every member of the group. Heads swivel, ears tilt, eyes track the graph at the perimeter, the gap between the trees, the sky. Someone, probably a younger male, drops to the ground first and scans. Nothing moves. He calls softly. Others follow. The group descends together and moves together, a loose cluster that never fully separates, because separation is how things get picked off at the edges. They find a carcass, a wildebeest that died in the night. They approach cautiously, checking for the predator that may still be nearby. They eat fast, in bursts, heads coming up between bites. No one wanders more than a few body lengths from the group. Children stay pressed against adults. At the first unexpected sound from the tree line, everyone moves at once, not away, but together, clustering, standing taller, making more noise. This is your inheritance, not the tools, not the fire, not even the language. First came the group. First came the watching. Fire came later, and when it did, it changed everything. The anthropologist Richard Wrangham at Harvard has argued across multiple decades of research that the control of fire, which appears in the fossil record with variable regularity around 400,000 years ago, was one of the most significant shifts in the human anti-predator story. A campfire did not just provide warmth or cook food, it created a perimeter. Most large predators have a deep instinctive aversion to open flame. A group huddled around the fire at night was a group that was suddenly, finally, reasonably safe in the dark. The circle of firelight was the first wall your ancestors ever built. Before fire, nights were terrifying. Your ancestors had poor night vision compared to the predators that were hunting them. Darkness was when the cats came out. Darkness was when everything shifted in favor of the thing that had better eyes and quieter feet. After fire, the equation changed. The predators that had shaped your ancestors for millions of years suddenly had a new problem, and your ancestors for the first time could sleep a little more deeply. Here is the part that most people do not expect. Being hunted made you smarter. The sustained pressure of predation across millions of years of evolution appears to have driven significant cognitive development in your lineage. Predator avoidance requires what scientists call theory of mind, the ability to model another creature's awareness and predict its behavior before it acts. Where is the leopard looking? Does it see me? What will it do if I move? These are not simple calculations. These are the same cognitive operations that underlie complex social reasoning, planning, and language. The primatologist Lynn Isbell proposed what she calls the snake detection hypothesis, the idea that the visual system of primates, including your visual system right now, evolved in significant part as a response to the threat of camouflaged venomous snakes. We developed an extraordinarily fast neural pathway for detecting hidden, curving,
partially obscured threats before the rest of our brain has processed what we are looking at. You can see danger that tries to hide. You built that ability under pressure. You built it because everything that could not build it died before passing the ability on. The monsters made you. And here is what that means for you, sitting in a chair right now in a world where nothing is actively hunting you. That system is still running. the hair that rises on the back of your neck in a dark parking lot at night, the way a sudden movement at the edge of your vision snaps your full attention before your conscious mind has registered what moved, the low, difficult-to-explain dread of being alone in a large space where you cannot see all the way to the edges, the way your pulse spikes when you hear a sound you cannot immediately explain. These are not anxiety disorders. They are not overreactions. They are 2 million years of extremely well-calibrated threat detection, running faithfully in a body that no longer needs them quite the way it once did. You carry the memory of the predator in your nervous system. You were built by it, refined by it. Every cognitive ability you have ever used, your social intelligence, your fear of the dark, your need to belong, your eyes that find things that try to hide, was forged under the pressure of something waiting in the grass. And the only reason you are here is that your ancestors, for millions of years, were afraid enough and smart enough and together enough to survive one more night. You hear it before you see it. You always have. That is the whole point.